Welcome back, and make sure you support the channel. Okay, let's review all of the improvements. These are things that your workers will do on different tiles. Okay, so the first one is a camp. This is going to be only for certain resources. In my opinion, camps are pretty bad because they don't really give that much. This is basically, okay, so +2 with deer. That's basically just like a pasture or a farm. It's not an amazing resource. Fur is only +3. That's not an amazing resource. Ivory +1. That's actually really bad. And normally later in the game you can go ahead and pave over that. Basically you build camps to get the resources and trade them away or use them yourself. Otherwise, these aren't very good. You can even replace a fur camp. I guess the nice thing is that it doesn't remove the forest if you want to keep that as production. So, you know, like with deer, that can be +2 food, +1 production, which is actually a decent tile. Although normally deer and fur are going to be in tundra, and these are going to be useless anyways. Ivory is just a bad tile, except that ivory is really good early in the game. Pillaging, not that fun to pillage either. You only need hunting for it though, so that's kind of nice. And these are happiness resources really early in the game. So I mean, and even this is a good food resource early in the game, very early anyways. So, you know, like you'll build camps, but I mean it's very specific. City ruins, not really a thing. Archaeology city ruins, great. Cottages. So cottages are really great over a long period of time, but you need to know that you're going to have that long period of time. Essentially, the evaluation is with a town. That's what you're aiming for. That's what you're gonna go for. I mean, I guess you could like make a cottage and then get rid of it later. But most of the time, you build a cottage, you're intending to keep it, because if you actually wait long enough, the town is hardly ever worth getting rid of. Especially if you have some of these other things. Whereas, you know, like later in the game, maybe you don't build cottages because it'll take too long to develop and everything. But I think we'll get to a town later. A farm. Farms are probably really important in order to get your population up, so that your cities can grow. They actually early in the game with slavery, I think are a better source of production than actual mines, because of, you know, combine that with a granary and how much you can whip up, and then also build up your cities and maybe get some more money because of that. You can even build farms temporarily just to get a good food boost, and then switch them over to cottages once your city is a lot larger, instead of waiting a really long time for those cottages to all get worked. So, and then obviously the food resources are really good, but also farms are something that get a lot better throughout the game too. With biology, you can even turn the tundra into pretty good land to use. Farms are basically your way of making cities happen. Without farms, you know, the plains would be completely useless because there wouldn't be enough food. Tundra could be completely useless. Grassland would be the only one that could possibly sustain anything. So farms are really important, and these food resources are probably the best in the game. You know, of the non-strategic ones. Fishing, these are really great if you have them. I would probably say better than a farm. because you also get gold with those tiles. They get better with aquaculture, but aquaculture is like near the end. You're probably never really going to see that. They're pretty cheap to build as well. It's unfortunate, you know, like unlike a worker that can just continue to do things, this is just a one-use fishing boat. I also feel like they can be a lot more difficult to protect. At least I don't tend to have a large navy. Forest preserves. I think that these are complete trash. I need someone in the comments to tell me why these actually are any good, but I think they're terrible. Okay, great. You get +1 gold if you're next to a river, and you get to keep the forest. So +1 production and +1 gold. That's awful. You can get +2 gold with environmentalism. Okay, so basically you turn it all into a fur camp, which is not fun. And to get that extra gold, you also have to have environmentalism, which is pretty bad. You don't really get much from that. It also comes really late in the game, which is really dumb. +1 happiness in nearby cities. You know, I guess if like you have tiles that aren't being worked that you haven't decided to chop for the extra production, which is way better than leaving it there, you can get +1 happiness for a city if it's like really angry or something, and you can maybe spread more forests in tiles that I guess you aren't working for some reason. Basically the only reason I ever build these is for that one national wonder, which is, where's that? Wonders. What's it called? The national park, which gives 1 free specialist per forest preserve, which can actually make the tiles really good, and you don't even have to work them. The city just needs to have access to them. So like a different city isn't allowed to work them, but you're allowed to work them. Or you don't have to work them, but you still get the specialist. So like you could do this in jungles or in tundra, where there isn't a lot of food, and make a city actually pretty good. Although it's going to be hard to build this in a bad city. And the other reason I will build a forest preserve is in the tundra where you can't build farms, and the tile isn't being worked. I'll build a forest preserve to maybe spread the forest somewhere else. But I will also only do that at the end when my workers have nothing else to do. And you might as well. Otherwise, this is trash in my opinion. Like, gives terrain a higher chance to spread. I've never even like seen it be that significant either. Like it's not like, oh, it's guaranteed to spread. It's gonna like happen in the next 10 turns. This is just terrible. Okay, a fort. In general, pretty bad improvement, since it doesn't, you know, give you anything except defenses. But there can be reason to build these if you have like a strategic choke point. Like the easiest example is where the modern day Suez Canal is, from Egypt to the Middle East, because that's only one tile and it's a hill. You go and plop a fort on that, and then you can easily defend all of Africa from invasion from the Middle East if you're Egypt. The issue actually is that it acts as a city for combat purposes. You might think that that is helpful because, you know, you can have like longbows with city defense, but I actually find that it's a problem because you'll have invading stacks that are trained with city attack, especially the siege units, and then they'll get all these bonuses to attack you, which can actually make it harder to defend. So that can be a bit problematic. Also, it doesn't mention anything about it, but you can use forts to build canals for your navy. There can be some advantages to doing that. It can give you your ships more movement, or even the ability to hide out in a lake that the enemy can't get to, and then you can easily heal up or something, or escape, or even build like a 3 tile bridge with a fort, a city, a fort, and then you can cross land with your ships. The only way it works as a canal is if it's next to water. It also will give you the resource if you build it on top of a resource, and I generally think that that's not very convenient, except like maybe if you're engaged in a really bad war, you only have one of a strategic resource, so instead of like a mine on your uranium, you go and build a fort on your uranium, and that's because a fort is much harder to destroy for spies or Air Force, like fighter jets and whatnot. It's rare that I build forts, but they can have some application. Hamlet we're just gonna skip because it's basically the cottage. Lumber mills. There was once a day I was a big fan of lumber mills. Nowadays though, it takes a long time to not chop that forest to get replaceable parts in most games, at least in marathon games. And then you only get +1 production, and then another +1 with the railroad. You do get +1 from keeping the forest, so that's like +3. And then this I never feel like this actually works. Like I feel like this is a bug. It doesn't actually add the commerce when it's supposed to. I don't know why. That's unfortunate. I don't know if it would make it worthwhile. The issue is that I normally just want to chop and build something else, like a cottage or a farm. You get 90 production on marathon. You get 90 production immediately, which would take with a railroad, it would take 30 turns to build that up. Or you can just get a farm immediately. So I mean, they can be nice to build like later in the game if you still have the forest. You don't need to like rush any kind of production. Maybe it's a less productive city on the coast or something, and you could use some extra production. But most of the time, I don't feel like they're worth it. They are really good tiles if you're building workshops anyways, and you don't have state property, because like you can get the +3 from the tech. Like you'll have chemistry by the time you have replaceable parts, or around the same time. If you don't have caste system, it's just the +3, and then you're taking a -1. So that would make the tile not as good as a lumber mill. If you have state property though, then it's just the +3 like the lumber mill is. And then all you do is lose the forest, but forest only provides half of a health point, which maybe you want to keep, but maybe it's better just to have the production. I normally find that it is. If you have caste system though, then the workshop's probably just better. Okay, a mine. Obviously great for all these resources. Small chance of discovering. I would never bet that actually happens, but normally in the course of a game it will happen. I mean, they're good. Like there's not too much you can do on a hill besides like a windmill, which spoiler kind of sucks. Maybe, I don't know, we'll talk about it. And then when you have a railroad, like it's really good. It gives +3. That's really nice. especially if you don't have state property. And the workshops are really good. If you don't have state property, then yeah, these mines are like going to be your main source of production. Offshore platform, pretty straightforward. Obviously, you want to put those there. And in terms of how it is, +2, +1, that's pretty good for a water tile. Like whaling boats, +1, +2. Whereas for a water tile, production is more significant because they don't provide that. You know, like a coastal city isn't going to have a lot of production probably, so it could use that bonus a lot more. Obviously, extremely late in the game, you probably never really see these. Pastures tend to be pretty good tiles. Normally, you keep these throughout the entire game. They're pretty good resources. There can be reason to get rid of them, especially the horses. Like I think a water mill, once you get electricity, it's just better. It's just better than the horses, and the horses are probably obsoleted by then. You're not really building any. So if it's against water and you can do that, then you're doing that. Plantation, I actually find that most of these are pretty bad, like especially sugar, that's awful. Spices, I'm not too thrilled about that. Silk is only +3, that's pretty bad. Incense is at least +5. Dye is only +4. You can do better with a town, even before any of the bonuses. Obviously a town takes a while to get, and you want the resource from it. So you probably end up building the plantation on the dye. Bananas is fine, until farms can have hydroponics. Bananas are fine. But these gold ones, especially sugar, those are normally good to build a city on top of the resource instead. I would even venture to say that if there's a tile that you don't need in your city borders to work, these are contenders for that in the late game. A quarry, quarries are fine. Stone, it's basically a mine. Actually, it is a mine. Marble, the gold is not too interesting. I guess you get another +1 from a railroad, but a town might be better if you don't really need it. But normally you'll just keep the marble. Okay, towns are really, really good, but obviously they take forever to obtain. If you're playing that long game, then yeah, these are really good. If you have universal suffrage, if you have free speech, these are even better. But you can justify these just on +4 or +5 gold. Add in a production, and these turn into a really amazing tile. Add in 2 gold, so like you can have, this can be +1 production, +7 gold, and that's just phenomenal. If you cottage spam and then early in the game and they all build up from a large territory, you are gonna have a lot of money, and that's good. Tribal villages, I normally turn these off because sometimes they can give advantages that are just too large, and I don't like that. Village, basically, it's the cottage thing again. Water mills, pretty boring when they first come on the scene with only +1 production, but then they start getting more interesting. Plus another production with replaceable parts, which makes them as good as a mine until you get railroad. +1 food with state property, which makes them better than a farm until you get biology, and +2 gold with electricity, which can make them a lot better, actually just really good tiles, especially if you're financial. You go and build these along rivers, and they give you a ton of stuff. Issue is that they can only be built on rivers, and you can't build them on top of each other. So like it has to use the river. If the river is straight, you can only put it on one side of the river. But yeah, they can be really good tiles. And if you have enough workers, it can give reason to adjust all your improvements at certain points of the game. The windmill can be the same. Adjust all your improvements so that you can better optimize things. A well is fine. I mean, +2, +1 isn't stellar or anything, but you know, like the water mill is better than that once you get electricity. But you need oil, so what are you gonna do? Whaling boats are fine. We already kind of talked about that. Windmill. Okay, so a windmill immediately will give +1 food, +1 gold. So once you get that, that is better than a farm. So if you are stressing gold, you can get rid of mines, and get rid of farms, and put cottages on wherever you had your farms, and windmills wherever you had your mines. And that'll give you a tiny bit more gold if you have, you know, the extra workers for it. An extra gold with electricity, that doesn't seem all that significant, but it is if you're financial and these windmills aren't on rivers, because now you're getting a lot more gold. +1 production with replaceable parts. That is pretty good, and of course makes it still a lot better than a farm before biology. Once you get biology, things can change a bit, and you can justify building farms again. But it can make windmills really good. Basically, after replaceable parts, like water mills and windmills are great to have if you have the food and the city is already large enough. And especially if you get state property, although then you might just be building mines. It's difficult. You know, like a mine is gonna give you. So before railroad, it's only gonna give you +2, and if you have replaceable parts, then +1, +1, +1 is probably better. But it also might not be, depending on how much you value production. And how much food you have in the city. So, but once the mine is getting +3 production, it gets a lot harder to justify building a windmill. Depending on, I mean, maybe if you value food and commerce a lot more than production, it's fine to build a windmill. But normally I value production at like 2 gold to 3 gold, because of the universal suffrage conversion. Normally I don't build wealth. If I'm building wealth, then yeah, a windmill is better. Then my production is only worth one gold. So it can be dependent on what kind of economy you're running, but I normally go for buildings, and my production is worth a bit more than that. With environmentalism, I mean, I really don't think that you ever get environmentalism, but +1 food, +4 gold, +1 production, that is a pretty strong tile. But I don't know if it ever justifies getting environmentalism when you could easily just get different kinds of tiles. Winery, +1 food, +2 gold. That's pretty boring to me. You know, like a farm with biology can give you +2 food. A water mill with state property can give you a lot more stuff. I just don't think that's all that significant. A workshop. Workshops are highly dependent on what you have. When they first come online, it's just -1 food, +1 production, which I think is terrible. Maybe if you have a lot of food and you really need production for some reason, but in that case, just use slavery, man. You know, like what are you doing with these useless workshops? Once you have guilds, I still don't think that you can really justify it. -1 food and +2 production. That still seems pretty bad. Once you have chemistry, though, or the caste system, that's when it can be okay to build some workshops. Because then you have -1 food, +3 or +4. +4 would be really good. That's when, you know, you can start justifying this kind of thing. +1 food with state property. If you have state property, workshops are amazing, because then you're just adding production. These can be better than mines, especially if you have the caste system. You know, you don't have to wait for the railroad to get the +3. So, and food is probably the hardest thing to control with this. You know, like if you're building workshops and you don't have state property, then you're also building farms, in order to keep up with everything. If you have state property, then you don't have to worry about farms as much, and you can really just add in production. So there you go. That's all of the improvements. Thanks for watching. Make sure to like, comment, or subscribe.